The world of Marvel is filled with some of the most interesting inventions that play an essential role in the larger arc at play. But while some of these weapons or inventions are left unexplained, others are so well designed that one can almost picture the real-world rendition of the device. You might have seen one of these devices quite a few times in the movies, but then a lot was left unexplained. We are talking about the weapon that allowed Xavier to form his glorious X-Men team and save the world on various occasions. But have you ever wondered what Cerebro is and how it plays a key role in the X-Men lore or the Marvel lore as a whole? Let's look at Cerebro, and maybe we'll find some important mutants on the way. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What is Cerebro? Mutant Finder. Imagine you want to build a team of mutants with abilities that will be useful to you in maintaining peace amongst mutants and humans. Who you gonna call? Professor Xavier. And what will he use to help you? Cerebro. In a world where mutants are scattered, hunted, and often unaware of their capabilities, Cerebro acts as a means of finding these individuals. Of course, you can't just put up a poster for all the mutants in your neighborhood to register for your mutant party, but the problem is that few of them would turn up for the registration. In that scenario, Cerebro acts as a means of finding them and often helping out those who didn't know that they were in fact mutants. The device played a key role in seeking mutants before it was too late so that they could be protected and helped. Even though the objective has changed over the years, with newer narratives looking into other functionalities for the weapon, one thing has been consistent: allowing a telepath to detect and communicate with mutants over vast distances. It managed to give Professor X godlike abilities by increasing his reach and amplifying his telepathic skills so that he could locate any mutant on the planet, no matter where they are, read and communicate with multiple minds, detect some new mutants, and also manipulate or control minds on an unbelievable scale. So the next time a flash mob appears around you, there's a chance Xavier is sitting in his room with Cerebro popped on and listening to Kendrick Lamar's latest. Now that you know about the device, let's get into its origins and how it became one of the most significant weapons in mutant history. Origins of Cerebro, Xavier's dream. After his first understanding of the effect of evil mutants on a vulnerable mind, Professor Charles Xavier dedicates himself to protecting humans and mutants from each other so they can peacefully coexist. He intended to seek out mutants using a device and enroll them in his school for gifted youngsters, where he could provide these young mutants with guidance regarding their abilities and conventional education. Even though it was way back when he was in Bombay that he had started working on a device for this purpose, it was only later that he had some way to bring his ideas to the practical level. After enrolling his first student, Jean Grey, Xavier decided to use her telepathic powers to calibrate the very first version of Cerebro. Xavier knew very well that Jean was a powerful mutant herself, so taking her help also ensured that the device wasn't overwhelmed by that level of mutant caliber. Only later would Xavier discover that only certain mutants with a certain caliber could use this weapon. In contrast, others might be overwhelmed by the mere idea of amplifying their capabilities. Xavier, an Omega-class telepath himself, would be able to enhance his ability significantly. In this manner, he could catch and locate mutant signatures over a long range. In his own words, it is actually a complex ESP machine which I call Cerebro, from the Latin cerebrum, meaning the brain. Its sole purpose is to aid in detecting new mutant brainwaves, to help locate other mutants, both good and evil. But then, Cerebro wasn't always Cerebro, and in fact, the version of this device that Xavier used to find Scott Summers, a runaway mutant who would end up being part of the very first version of X-Men, was dubbed Cerebro. After Scott Summers had been detected, the device also helped him locate another mutant, the Living Diamond, a criminal. Xavier managed to save Summers from the Living Diamond and took him in as Cyclops, and it was through this experience that he realized that he should make something that can help him detect more such mutants and help them out in a similar manner. After Cerebro, various versions have helped in different manners and have been used in different ways by the evil mutants for their intentions. It also ended up being sentient at a point with negative and positive outcomes. So, it makes sense that Cerebro was a key player in forging a weapon to help build the X-Men we know of. After all, if it weren't for Cerebro, we wouldn't have had the chance to learn that Mr. Santa Claus is the most powerful mutant ever to be discovered by the device. Yes, the man who brought gifts for us all these years and delivered them in a single night was a mutant after all. Who would have known? How does it work? The ultimate mind leap. So the question remains, how does this machine work in a world filled with so much technobabble? Well, considering minds like Xavier's and Beast's were behind it, you would be surprised to see how surprisingly sophisticated this machine is. The original Cerebro was a simple device with a control panel integrated onto Xavier's desk. At this phase, the device was being used to assist him in detecting mutants using his powers. Still, no particular enhancement allowed him to amplify his telepathic powers to detect these mutants. The functionality was expanded later by putting it up with a radar image beam that projected visuals of detected mutants, allowing real-time observation. A multi-frequency booster that helped locate these particular mutant signals with greater accuracy. Finally, a plasticine tubing, an ultramagnetic splicer, and super tensile cables ended up forming the very backbone of this sophisticated system. Now, even though there would be many enhancements to this device over the years, it is important to note that this version, what we can call the second, or the third, or the N-1th version, played a big role in getting us the love team of mutants who would be called the X-Men. Enough with the nostalgia. Let's dive into the technological marvel this equipment would end up being in a few more years. Realizing that this could be more than a simple tracking tool, Xavier decided to incorporate some other existing technology into it. A tape recorder could help keep a record of the mutant signals for later analysis, and a Visi screen would allow the user to visualize the real-time location of the mutant, making the process more efficient. But this technology's importance and value proved that it could be used for unfair means. Hence, some emergency tech like the helmet was also incorporated, which could erase your memory to protect the information. At the same time, the emergency circuit could automatically detect a significant mutant presence. Eventually, all these additions would make Cerebro important for the X-Men's missions and become a crucial part of the early battles the team of heroes would go for, particularly the ones against Magneto and his Brotherhood of Mutants. Later, when such a device became known to the world, it was decided that the machine required a dedicated chamber inside the X-Mansion. Some serious security protocols were invoked to prevent this equipment from subversive threats. These safeguards ensured that only those Xavier trusted could interface with Cerebro, and hence, any chance of other mutants trying to use it for their benefit was prevented. There are exceptions, as we saw in the movies with Mystique using her ability to sneak inside the mansion and get inside the chamber where Cerebro was installed. With the device now being limited to a dedicated chamber, the next big enhancement had to do with the idea of making it portable. So, a version of Cerebro was made that allowed for real-time tracking of mutants in the field using connections made to the main unit via telemetry. So, when the X-Men were on the move, they could use the enhancement capability and wouldn't be limited to the mansion for their work. This enhancement proved useful during the desperate search for the kidnapped X-Men during the Dark Phoenix saga. While all these things were happening, a massive change awaited Cerebro when Sidri destroyed the X-Mansion, and Cerebro was also blown to bits. Xavier, who, like most other Marvel characters, has unlimited financial resources, rebuilt the mansion, and this time around, he integrated advanced Shi'ar tech into the core systems. This has to be the biggest upgrade into the machine because it now has a powerful computer core that can process vast amounts of data quickly and thus help increase the device's precision at detecting mutant activity. It also allowed the telepaths using the device a chance to enhance their capability. Now, Xavier could detect intergalactic threats and thus put the X-Men through some rather interesting encounters, including the Shi'ar Empire and even the Starjammers. Xavier would develop another Cerebro unit at the Muir Island Research Center, which Moira MacTaggart ran, which would play a significant role in the Muir Island saga arc. With each enhancement, Cerebro became more and more valuable, and thus became a target for some rather sinister people. When the alien race by the name of the Phalanx infiltrated the mansion, they attempted to seize control of the device. Still, realizing the threat that it poses to the mutants, Banshee initiated the self-destruct protocol and wiped its entire data. Xavier was determined to continue with his work and managed to build another Cerebro, but this one would fail right after it was started because of a huge energy spike in northern New Jersey. It was because of a battle that took place amongst several mutants that ended up overloading the system, and thus Bishop had to get involved in the repairs. Bishop had an interesting arc associated with the machine because the advanced technology used for the machine had some interesting similarities with his future timeline. This meant this weapon might have a different origin than the one we knew to be associated with Xavier. Finally, there was the version of the Cerebro, which we have seen the most in the X-Men films, with a spherical chamber and a suspended walkway leading to the command console and an interface helmet kept at its center. Remember how William Stryker managed to use it to target and eliminate the mutants, setting up a clear example of how the weapon could be dangerous when put in the wrong hands? So, as time passed, the device saw more upgrades, and it had the potential for even greater utilizations, to the level that would help the X-Men keep the peace and fulfill Xavier's goals. Hank McCoy worked on a version of Cerebro that he called Cerebro, which was considered even more powerful as it took the enhancements to a grander scale. Cerebro allowed them to track mutants across the universe, establish a deeper psychic connection, and prevent any chances of harming the user. So, apart from being another major technological gadget for the X-Men, Cerebro is tightly wrapped into the arc of the mutants and even their fate. Each time a new threat arrived, Cerebro would somehow play an essential role in preventing the danger and ensuring that the original objective was kept focused. Even though we have observed that the primary objective of Cerebro was to find mutants and help them, the latest arc from the X-Men says that this weapon might have a wholly different purpose. According to Jonathan Hickman's House of X narrative, the mutant location might be a secondary function of Cerebro, with the primary objective being serving as a database for collecting imprints of every single mutant that Charles Xavier came in contact with. According to Hickman, all this time, everyone has misunderstood what Cerebro really was. Yes, with it, Charles could locate any mutant in the world, but that eventually became the secondary function of the machine. The first was copying the mind, the essence, the anima of any mutant Xavier found, so he could one day put a soul back into its mutant shell. So, this new narrative suggests that Cerebro was supposed to be a mutant soul collector, making Xavier some version of a god who can restore life and soul to the dead. In fact, Xavier might have used this ability for himself by reviving himself, an arc that has been present various times in the X-Men lore. Only the strongest minds survive. Notable users. Only those who can bear the feedback can survive the ordeal of using Cerebro, and that's important to note because even the best of the best have tried and failed, even though a lot of individuals have used this device. We're going to go through some of the most important users and the impact that the device ended up having on them. Starting with the Summers family, we will discuss the individuals on whom one of the early versions of Cerebro was tried and tested. Jean Grey. As we had discussed, Jean was one of the most powerful telepathic mutant on the planet Earth, and that has always put her in trouble, particularly if you take the Phoenix Saga arc in focus. Even though we have seen her suffer from the feedback quite a bit in the movies when using Cerebro, she is the one who has used it the most next to Xavier in the comics. She has proven herself again and again as someone whom even Xavier considered as a successor when handling the Cerebro. Even her daughter, Rachel Summers, has been able to use Cerebro on several occasions. Rachel has seemingly unlimited telepathic abilities, ranging from manipulating the cognitive processes of other people and gaining control over them to swapping people's minds from their bodies. Considering her powers stem from her mother, it only makes sense that she would be able to use the weapon. However, such is not the case for Nathan Summers, or Cable as we know him, because his complex biology combines Madeline Pryor's and Scott Summers. If you're wondering why he would be needed to operate the Cerebro, then you should pay attention to the Phoenix Saga arc, where the X-Men needed someone to look for Jean Grey and they were already running short on telepaths. Cable decided to don the helmet and take a chance, with disastrous results, as the helmet would be shattered into pieces and he was left groaning with pain on the floor, thus proving that it was not an easy weapon to be careless around. Cable should have known that even though his father had used the Cerebro once, their version was most likely a desktop that could be used like a computer to track down mutants without affecting the user significantly. So, Scott basically didn't use the telepathic version. Otherwise, he would have had a much more difficult time dealing with the feedback that almost killed Cable. While Professor Xavier is a regular user and often plays a key role in developing this weapon, you would be surprised to know that his arch-enemy and friend, Magneto, also had some telepathic abilities of his own. Even though the helmet manages to shield him from any telepathic attack, his ability also further reinforces this shield. But being the wise one, he never really used the Cerebro himself, but managed to manipulate some other telepath into using it for his purposes. Other users include Kitty Pryde, Emma Frost, Betsy Braddock, the Stepford Cuckoos, and last but never the least, Cassandra Nova. Nova actually managed to use it to get into Xavier's brain and manipulate him according to her will. Yeah, that could have gone anywhere but good. Cerebro's legacy, the sentient, and the sword. Before we jump into the legacy of this device, we have to mention how it got integrated into the mansion as the school's AI and served the school and Xavier for decades. Now that you know that, prepare yourself for some really interesting versions of this device that you would have never imagined and how it played a key role in the arc of the Mutants. Cerebro's evolution into the sentient entity, Cerebro Prime, marked a crucial turning point for the Mutants. It's almost like Ultron's arc from Age of Ultron, because Cerebro managed to gain autonomy using nanotechnology and continued its objective for safeguarding mutants, but in a manner that would prove very dangerous for the others. It almost worked like an arc that was trying to prove the perils of artificial intelligence when it was unrestrained. Eventually, it formed its version of the X-Men and launched a global surveillance, threatening humanity and mutants. So, Xavier decided to overdose it by expanding its awareness from data collection to the complex nature of a human's individuality. This proved heavy on Cerebro, and it self-destructed before it could form any idea of the unpredictable nature of the human identity. But that's not the last you would hear of Cerebro in a different form, as a version eventually proved that a sword might actually be mightier than the pen. Yes, forged from the ruins of Cerebro, the Cerebro sword is one of the most powerful swords in the Marvel lore, and contains a vast trove of information involving the guidance of Magneto and the resilience of Xavier's dreams. The weapon was an essential device for the mutant resurrection. It also acts like a telepathic conduit, so the wielder could use it for much more than a weapon. In fact, it transported Omega Red right through time, bypassing the parameter of a traditional telepath required for the conventional approach. It stands next to Excalibur as one of the most significant weapons in Marvel history, and it is a symbol of Xavier's ideology. Marvelous verdict. There's a chance that all these events associated with Cerebro could be toppled by a whole new event that proves wilder and crazier. But whatever happens, one can never forget how important Cerebro is to the core of the X-Men arc, as it has repeatedly managed to keep Xavier's principle alive. Do you think the Marvel Cinematic Universe will play around with their version of Cerebro? Something that's far more different than what we have seen so far. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks everyone.